right there, buddy old pal, old buddy old buster old pal. We've got something special today, and that's because we get to talk about World Cup qualifying, and I never get to talk. I'm just kidding. I can do whatever I want here. This is my little palace or something. I don't know. That sounds weird, but I promise you this is going to be good because World Cup qualifying in Asia has gone fucking buck wild. And yeah, if you've not caught up with exactly what's happening, I'm just going to clue you in because you're not really going to believe it. And I just wanted to make sure that when March comes around and 2 more matches happen in this group, that you would know it was happening, because this is probably, outside of San Marino, the greatest drama you're going to be getting in football, at least for a little while. See, Asia's got 3 qualifying groups that are going. I'm going to pull them up for you so that you can oogle at all 3. Group A, which had its own interesting, weird stuff happen. Iran is top of the group. Uzbekistan's in an automatic qualifying spot in second. We love to see that. They pulled off a win against North Korea. North Korea missed a penalty in that match, so that's the last we're ever going to see of that guy. And then there was one very huge, pivotal, important match where, can you believe that team hosted a World Cup? That's a real thing. A real thing that actually happened. That team on the right hosted a World Cup. They really did. I'm dead serious. You didn't hallucinate it. They are also the 2-time Asian champions. So it's pretty impossible for them to explain this away. The United Arab Emirates is the most okay of okay teams you could possibly find in the Asian, confederation. They are not a team that makes the World Cup, really. They've been once in the 80s. They're a team that makes the final round of qualifying and then bows out gracefully in a competitive manner. They're not a team that's supposed to be able to beat the alleged 2-time best team in Asia. It's not alleged. I mean, everybody's trying to win the Asian Cup. It's not some, soft trophy where, Japan's sending its B team. Qatar has managed to somehow win the damn thing twice, and yet they just got gun smoked by the UAE 5-0. So I threaten you to try and come up with a solution there. Then there's Group B, right? This is also not the group we're talking about, but I'm just catching you up. South Korea's top. Iraq has come in second. That's an automatic spot. That would send Iraq to the World Cup. I figured this group was going to be wild because the difference between Iraq, Jordan, Oman, Kuwait, and Palestine is, or at least was, basically minimal at best. I mean, Palestine in the last place in this group right now made it to the knockouts in the Asian Cup. These are all capable teams that, if they'd gotten hot, would have been able to actually finish in the top 2. But right now, Iraq's making it look good, and Jordan's in the conversation. Iraq won their last match against Oman. That was a bit of a sorting hat match. And they've got 10 matches to play total, so we're just a little bit over halfway. That these things are the appetizer, because the main attraction is this other group. And it really boils down to this one match. Bahrain and Australia. It doesn't really boil down to just this one match. There was another match that we're going to talk about too, but Bahrain and Australia are what let us know that Group C in Asia was going to be particularly ridiculous. Because this qualifying group opened with Bahrain, a team that's never been to the World Cup and nobody really ever thinks about when it comes to football, even though they've been fairly competitive and fairly relevant for some time. They went to Australia and won 1-0. That's how this whole shindig started. And then we got treated to an absolute, treat. Australia goes to Bahrain. They get a goal in the opening minute. And you're thinking, well, Australia's Australia. They've been to 5 straight World Cups. They're probably going to be able to handle this and run away with it. Then Bahrain scores 2 goals in 3 minutes. Hassan, and then it looks like, I think he's a doctor and a lawyer, right? He scores both goals, and all of a sudden, Bahrain has jumped out in front. And now Australia is staring into the abyss of dropping all 6 points to freaking Bahrain. But Australia has this unique ability. I talk about this a lot. This unique ability to do exactly enough to put themselves in position to make it to the World Cup. And they get it from this guy, Yengi. Now, Yengi, Kusini Yengi, who plays for Portsmouth, scored 2 goals 96 minutes apart in this game. It's kind of irrelevant. I just think that it's neat that it happened, and that allowed Australia to split the points with Bahrain, which actually is going to keep them in second. The problem for them is that everybody else is literally on their ass, right behind them. And that's because of this weird-ass score. Because what is this? All of a sudden, we've got Indonesia right on the transitive property to end up above Argentina. That's not supposed to be legal in the world. What do you mean? What? Indonesia's been getting better. I'll be honest. And maybe Football Manager has got, something to do with this, because I simulate Football Manager into the future a lot. And when we did a sim that was nearly 1,000 years, Indonesia ended up as one of the top 10 teams in the world. So in 1,000 years, put good money on Indonesia to be a very good team. But they actually just beat Saudi Arabia. They beat them in Indonesia, right? And there is some protest that was tagged in some stuff about, perhaps some missed calls that went against Saudi Arabia. This certainly looks like something that should have been a card. The other ones they've attached look a little less egregious. But anytime you end up with a picture that looks like some outtake from the Karate Kid, there's a conversation that needs to be had about a card being handed out. But this is undoubtedly the best result in Indonesian history, at least in recent memory. A national team representing the fourth biggest country in the world, a football mad country, a country that won the Football Manager World Cup for whatever that's worth, and they've gone out on the field and gotten a win against Saudi Arabia. And if you're looking at Australia and Saudi Arabia and thinking, hold on a second, this is World Cup qualifying. These are two teams that we really expect to make it to the World Cup. What the hell are they doing? Well, they're doing this. Now, this is the table in Group C. I've held off showing you until just now, because now you understand the backstory. Australia's goal putting them at 7 points to put them into second. Bahrain dropping down to fifth because they conceded that last second goal. And Indonesia, with their win, jumping right back up to 6 points and actually leapfrogging Saudi Arabia. And it has produced a group that is a group that boggles the imagination, boggles the mind. The other match in this group, by the way, was Japan beating China 3-1. That also means China is the only one of all these teams that's already played Japan twice. So wouldn't that make China the favorite? You can also sprinkle in the fact that China is the only one of these teams with 2 wins. The team in second place in the group only has 1 win, Australia. But they also only have 1 loss, to Bahrain for some reason. And then China's in last place with 2 wins from their 6 matches. And they won those 2 matches very recently against Bahrain and against Indonesia, who just went out and beat Saudi Arabia. Then you have this Saudi Arabian team that's lost to Japan and then got that stunner against Indonesia. Saudi Arabia's only win was against China. Bahrain's only win was against Australia. Indonesia's only win was against Saudi Arabia. It's like an incestuous mess. What the hell are we supposed to do with that collection of information? And just to give you an idea of the difference between these 2 spots and the kind of effect they can have on the future of these nations, second place, in case you missed it, is automatic. You go automatically to the World Cup. Japan, because of all of this infighting with everybody else, is basically already through. They're 9 points clear with a freaking plus 20 goal difference that you might have not noticed until just now. They started this group by beating China 7-0. China looked like they were going to get sent back to that time they invented gunpowder, and then all of a sudden they came back to life with consecutive wins. I have no idea how we've ended up at this point. But second place is an automatic spot in the World Cup. And if you finish 5th or 6th, you are fully out of the World Cup. No playoffs, no nothing. The difference between all of that is 1 point. The difference between 4th and 5th is 2 on the goal difference. And Bahrain has scored more goals than Saudi Arabia too. So if Saudi Arabia loses by 3 goals to Japan and Bahrain loses by 1, Bahrain would literally leapfrog Saudi Arabia just by losing less. That's how close this is. And I have some questions. Not for Australia. This is what Australia does. The last 2 World Cups they've qualified for through the playoff. They go to the World Cup and then all of a sudden they're very competitive. Hell, they made the knockouts at the last World Cup, just to jog your memory. I know it was like 2 years ago at this point, which is kind of insane to think about the fact that that was 2 years ago. My questions are for Saudi Arabia. What the fuck? All you guys have done is spent a ridiculous amount of money building up your domestic league where the vast majority of your national team plays. Saudi Arabia has been competitive in the sense that it competes hard for Asian Cups and sends competitive teams to World Cups that are at least able to give a game to a lot of teams. But Saudi Arabia took a massive step at the last World Cup. It beat Argentina. Remember, the last World Cup was also basically a home World Cup for Saudi Arabia. Qatar is like a little appendage attached to the side of Saudi Arabia. It's like hosting the World Cup in Florida and then saying that it's not a World Cup in the United States, right? Like that is essentially what happened, although they would never do that because that would be the last World Cup because Florida. I don't know. They'd figure out how to stop it. And I say they, I'm from Florida. I'm just trying to use distancing language here. But you usually get a bump from a home World Cup. You usually get a bump from spending billions of dollars to bring in talented players into your league. They spent a lot more than even China did bringing players into their league. And hell, you usually get a bump when you beat a team like Argentina, if not even in ability, just in confidence. They've played 6 matches in this group and they have 1 win. 6 matches, 1 win, and that 1 win was against a China team that got bodied by Japan. Bodied. Saudi Arabia was the next match after China lost 7-0, and they were only able to win that match 2-1. There is a very legitimate fear that the random Gulf state nation of Bahrain, the footballing backwater of Indonesia, and the perennially underachieving China could knock out Saudi Arabia, any one of them. And any time that you end up in a situation where this narrows down as much as this seems to be narrowing down, where it just gets whittled, like there's fewer and fewer matches for your quality to show, the more randomness there is. If we get through the next international window and this table is basically still this tight, anybody with the right bounce of the ball could end up grabbing that automatic qualifying spot. Although somehow it'll be Australia because that's just how all of this works. I've been paying attention to it long enough to know how all of this works. But I've been watching World Cup qualifying for a long time. And while Asia is normally able to produce very surprising possibilities with a couple of matches left, this isn't a very surprising possibility. This is absurd. This is the sort of thing that happens once when you simulate a tournament on Football Manager 100 times and you go, wow, could you imagine if that was happening in real life? It's happening in real life. Every team in this group has at least 6 points from their first 6 matches. I didn't know that was mathematically possible. And now it's going to decide who's going to go to the World Cup. 3rd and 4th go into the Asian playoff system, and I have a headache.